When it comes to food storage, have you ever asked yourself, where do I begin? Well, today I want to share two books with you. Food Storage 101, Where Do I Begin? And Self-Reliance, Recession-Proof Your Pantry. We're going to talk about both of these, and I'm going to give you my review. Hi, sweet friends. I'm Mary, and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making nutrient-dense foods like bone broth, ferments, sourdough, and more. So if you enjoy learning about those things, consider subscribing to my channel, and don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. Well, a while back in my travels, I found two very interesting books that I wanted to share with you, and I actually found them at a used bookstore. So they're definitely things you can keep your eye open for if you have used bookstores in your area, because both of them have been out a while. The first one I want to mention to you is Food Storage 101, Where Do I Begin? By Peggy Layton. And this was written in 1998. So as I said, you know, this has been around a while. I definitely think it's online. If I can find it online, I'll put a link in the description below. But keep your eyes open, because this is the type of thing that you can often find at a used bookstore. But it's a very interesting book, and we'll talk about it in a little more detail. But first I want to mention the other book as well. It's called Self-Reliance, Recession-Proof Your Pantry. And the reason that I wanted to talk about these two books with you, and there's many people, it's a number of articles in this book, and there's many people writing the articles, so there's no author in a sense, but it's a self-reliance guide from the Backwoods Home magazine. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Backwoods Home magazine, but it's a wonderful magazine with lots of great tips for being very self-reliant. Well, in any event, I wanted to talk to you about both of these books, especially since there has been so much talk during this time, this quarantine time, about being prepared and having a prepper pantry, in essence. And if you've not seen it, I did a 3-part series where I talked all about the prepper pantry. Number one, what is a prepper pantry and why do we all need one? Part 2 was how to stock your prepper pantry with real food as opposed to a lot of boxed processed food. And then part 3 was how to stock your prepper pantry on $5 a week, so that in addition to whatever your regular groceries you're buying, if you add an additional $5, you can start to build the supplies that you want in your prepper pantry. And so I talk a lot about how to make good combinations of foods for that $5 that also create variety. So you're not just stuck with one type of food like all rice or all beans or something like that. But if that's something that you're interested in, be sure to check that out. I'll put a link to the playlist in the description below, and I'll also put it in the pinned comment, whichever is easier for you to access. But that's a great series, especially if you're new to creating a prepper pantry, that I think can really help you, because I go into a lot of detail. And also in that playlist, I'll add videos that show you how to make things homemade that are shelf-stable that you can put in your prepper pantry. Like a recent video that I shared with all of you where I showed you how to make a cream of soup mix that's shelf-stable. So I'll put those, and how to make bouillon powder and things like that. That'll be in the playlist. And then I'll also have in the playlist videos that show you how to use all of these foods that are in your how to make meals using these foods in your prepper pantry, or how to make meals using some of your homemade ingredients. So definitely check that out. I think you'll find it very helpful. And I know many of you have asked me to kind of put this in a playlist so that you've got everything in one place, and that you can watch this in your leisure whenever the situation arises that you have time, or that you want to know something specific, you know you have it all together in that playlist. So definitely check the links below. And one other thing I want to mention is that I also have a pantry list. It's what I call the Essential Traditional Foods Four Corners pantry list. And it's very extensive, very comprehensive. It's about 36 pages long. You can certainly print it out, it's free, or you can just like keep it on your phone or your desktop computer. And I go over all the traditional foods that you may want to think about incorporating into your kitchen for your Four Corners pantry. So for your main working pantry, for your fridge, for your freezer, and for your extended pantry. And in that list, it's not just a list of things, but in addition to listing all of the foods, I also have a lot of little vignettes, or whatever you want to call them, little articles that I've included where I talk about these foods. And wherever I mention something that I have a recipe for or instructions on how to do, I have a video link. So you can click on that link. So if you're reading about as you're going through the list and I'm talking about grains, I have a video where I show you how to soak and sprout grains. You can click on that and watch that video. Or sourdough starter, I'll have the video link there. So as you go through that list, you know, it's not like I'm just going to leave you stranded. I explain how to use these things, whether it's to prepare them like a bone broth or how to use them in a meal. So hopefully you find that helpful, and I'll be sure to put that link in the description below. In the video, I have a video where I go through it page by page so you can see what it's all about. Well, this first book that I want to talk about is the Food Storage 101, Where Do I Begin? And it's by this gal, Peggy Layton. And this is a terrific book. I highly recommend this. Peggy Layton is a very interesting woman. She is a home economist, and she holds a Bachelor of Science degree in home economics education. And so she's definitely very well versed in talking about food and home economy. But this really is such a terrific little book. Even though it's just a little paperback, it is so chock full of information. And what I like is, if the concept of being prepared and the nickname, you know, being a prepper is very new to you, I think that you will really like her approach, because it really kind of jives with what I've shared with you in that first video in my Prepper Pantry series, is that prepping requires a plan, and it's a plan that you implement slowly over time. It's not hoarding. It's not going out and buying a ton of stuff and clearing the shelves and leaving nothing for anybody else. It's actually the complete opposite. It's putting together a plan and then implementing it little by little as your budget allows. And then when emergency hits, whether it's illness or job loss or bad weather or like what we're going through now, which hopefully we'll never go through again, but you're prepared. You have everything on hand. You don't need to rush out. So that's what I really like, because she has a 6-step plan of action. And so she sets you up with your plan, and then she talks about how to find a place in your home to set up your your what I call the extended pantry or the prepper pantry, where you're going to put your extra supplies. And then she also goes into a lot of detail about alternative cooking methods in the event that you didn't have electricity, and how to make sure that you can have clean water and water storage and water purification. And that's a very important thing, especially in the event of bad weather, where maybe your tap water is no longer clean. You know, that can be a problem, you know, in areas like even right here in Texas, where you have hurricanes. And so that is that's very important. But also too, she talks about, and this is something that came up in the comments when I did the Prepper Pantry series, was how to accommodate people with special diets. Many of you had mentioned, you know, I'm a vegetarian, or I'm a vegan, or I can't take dairy, or this, that, and the other thing. And that can be a difficult situation, you know, especially in a very serious emergency. So she addresses that. And she even talks about baby food. And then what she does is, and this is what I think is excellent, when she eventually gets, so after all of that discussion, she eventually gets to page 42. And she talks about, and also too, you're going to love this. I mean, she's got all kinds of charts in here. She's got how to reconstitute foods that you've dried. Just, work. The others were charts. These are, like work pages for your meal planning and what you've got, your inventory and how to go about using it. And I love something that I found really terrific about this was her action plan. She actually puts it like in little boxes like this. It makes it very easy to understand and to implement. But then what's great, when you get to page 42, she starts implementing the plan as to the specifics of food. And she talks about grains and how many pounds you need per adult and per child, how much rice or brown rice or legumes, milk and dairy products, sweeteners, fruits, vegetables, fats and oils. And she bases this, her plan is to have you well stocked with a prepper pantry that will have enough food and supplies, including, because she talks about medical supplies and water, for 1 year. So you can definitely scale it back if you want to have, a few weeks or a few months, whatever the case may be. But what's nice is you have the option of knowing what you're going to need based on how many family members you have for 1 year. And she even includes something that she talks about meats and meat substitutes, but she also has a few other things that she adds, like seeds, not necessarily seeds to eat, but purchasing and storing gardening seeds, so that if a situation were to become where there were significant shortages potentially of vegetables and beans and whatnot, you could grow some of it yourself. So that, I think, is extremely helpful. And then this is another one of, the charts that I'm talking about. She talks about basic and dehydrated foods, suggested 1 year food supply. And she goes, it's so easy to look at this. She has adults and she has children. And she breaks it out by age. And this is the most detail that I've seen, because a lot of those food storage calculations will just have you put in adults are like anybody over 12, and then children is anybody under 12. And so what's nice about her charts is she breaks it down to how much food you're going to need for children's 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, 10 to 12, and then 13 to 15. And then she considers the adult 16 and up. And she covers wheat, other grains, legumes, sweeteners, powdered milk, dehydrated eggs, salt, a variety of fruits that she recommends be dehydrated, a variety of vegetables also dehydrated, bouillon, onions, cheese powder, tomato powder, and many of these things you can make homemade. And then oil, yeast, and then the sprouting seeds, as I mentioned. And then once she walks you through how much food you're going to need, then she goes into the next steps of how to store food. She discusses storing it in buckets. You've probably seen the very common, those white 5-gallon buckets that sometimes, they either have that very firm lid that you have to open up with a tool, or they have the twisting gamma lids, which I'll definitely talk about that in another video. I'll show you the buckets I have and how to put them together and so on and so forth, because they're very handy. And so she talks about the buckets. She talks about Mylar bags. She talks about oxygen absorbers. And the thing is, you might be saying, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming. But again, remember, you're implementing a plan that you then are going to implement little by little. You're not getting all of this overnight. You're not having to worry about it all in a week. You're going to set up your plan, and you're going to implement it slowly, little by little. You take one, and the chapters are short. Chapter 5, one chapter is page 5, and then page 7, then page 13, then page 14, page 15. So these action plans are just little blurbs. They're not long, and you implement them over time as you see fit, and you determine what's appropriate for your family. And so she talks about the bay leaves method. I like very much using bay leaves. I find that's very good at keeping insects away. And she also talks about freezing grain. I just don't have the room to put a lot of grain in my freezer, because they say if you put grain in your freezer for a certain period of time, it would kill any eggs that may be mixed in there that would hatch and then have a bug. And that's great, but not all of us, have that type of space. So I'm glad to see included in here, she does talk about the bay leaf method, because I like that, storing food with bay leaves. She also talks about diatomaceous earth. And I think that's interesting, because I think it's important that we all know the different ways that we can prepare our food for high quality long-term storage, whether it's bay leaves or freezing first or diatomaceous earth, because one method may not necessarily work for every family or every person. I personally am not a fan of using diatomaceous earth, although it works very well killing insects, and it is, you're going to be using a food grade diatomaceous earth, and it basically, what it does is it dries out like the exoskeleton of the bug, and so the bug can't survive. But the only thing I worry, and especially if you have children, you need to be very careful when you're working with diatomaceous earth, because it's a powder. And if you inhale it, scientists have found that it can be very damaging to your esophagus and the lining in your lungs and so on and so forth. So you would want to wear a mask, and this is my humble opinion, to wear a mask and to some kind of goggles and not have your children around when you're working with it. That's just in my humble opinion. But I know a lot of people really like using diatomaceous earth, because there's going to be no bugs with diatomaceous earth. But in any event, then she talks about why food might deteriorate, and so how best to avoid that. I'm sorry, that's my ice maker. And then she talks about shelf life in general, and then all of the various aspects of why food might deteriorate: light, temperature, humidity and moisture, location, and so on and so forth. And then she pretty much wraps up with talking about, like homemade dehydrated foods. And that's what I like. It's not like you're not buying any expensive, you're doing all of this homemade. You're not having to buy any, expensive freeze-dried foods and things like that. She talks about, how to dehydrate food, how to reconstitute it, after it's been dehydrated. Then, as I showed you in the back there, she's got a nice space, for doing your meal plans based on whatever food storage you have. And then in the very back, she's got some wonderful charts, and these are basically to be used for you keeping inventory of what you have. Because again, that's important, because your extended pantry, which is going to have all non-perishables, is basically, your food storage, backup food, whatever you want to call it, that is feeding into your main working pantry. So you're putting food in there as you buy it, find it on sale, whatever the case may be. You're stocking up on those things that you already eat, that your family likes, so on and so forth. And when you find your working pantry, the main working pantry in your kitchen that you access on a regular basis, may be starting to become depleted, you then can go into your extended pantry, and you can, basically you're shopping from your extended pantry and you're refilling your working pantry. And then with your plan, over time, as you're at the grocery store, you restock things that you may have had to move out of your extended pantry into your working pantry. And again, it's first in, first out. So all the new things that you buy, you put behind any of your older goods in your extended pantry, so that nothing becomes expired or stale or so on and so forth. So you can see how keeping an inventory is important, because if you have, say, 6 cans of corn in your extended pantry and you've used everything up in your working pantry, so you move out 2 cans of corn from the front of your supplies into your working pantry, but you like to always have at least 6 cans of corn on hand, you know that on your next grocery shopping trip, and you have your inventory with you, you know, okay, I need to buy 2 cans of corn to restock my extended pantry. So if you're new to food storage, if you're new to the concept of an extended pantry or a prepper pantry, and you're wondering, gee, where the heck do I begin? This book is going to prove to be invaluable to you. I highly recommend this book. She's so methodical. You really can tell she's a home economist. She's so methodical that she walks you through every step. This is your plan. You know, when I was saying that to be a prepper, specifically like a prepper pantry prepper, someone who's focused on the food and feeding the family, you don't even really need to necessarily put together a specific plan, because you've got your plan right here. And then you can just make little notes in the margin or whatever to modify it or to make it exactly perfect for your family or yourself or your needs, whatever the case may be. But this will basically walk you through your whole plan. Next, I want to talk about the self-reliance, recession-proof, or self-reliance is the title, recession-proof your pantry. This is a wonderful book. It's got some wonderful articles in it. But if you were just choosing, one or the other, I would go with this one, the Food Storage 101, especially if you're a beginner. Because that's, as I said, that's your plan. It's all laid out there for you. But this is a really fun book. And if you're not familiar, and if you find it in your travels at a used bookstore, I definitely think it's worth adding to your library. And basically, I believe what it is that the magazine, Backwoods Home Magazine, which is a great magazine, by the way, I believe this is a compilation of articles that may have appeared earlier in their magazine, and articles that they felt, really spoke to the topic of self-reliance. I'm not seeing a date. Oh, copyright, 2003 through 2008. So there's probably been multiple editions, and maybe they've updated with new articles and whatnot. But what's nice about this book, and I think that, if you start with Food Storage 101 and you're getting this concept of having a prepper pantry and being prepared under your belt, so to speak, this can be a nice addition to your learning, because this has some articles about the pantry. Again, not as detailed as Food Storage 101, but nice things to give you additional information. The pantry section covers long-term food storage and can you survive out of your pantry for a whole year, and successful cold storage. So those are 3 good articles, and definitely if you implement Peggy's whole plan, yes, you can survive out of your food storage pantry. And when they use the term pantry, I use the Four Corners pantry too, because under most circumstances we can have our fridge and freezer, available to us, thank God. You can survive. They're talking about surviving out of your working pantry and your extended pantry, just on your non-perishable foods. So that's, hopefully none of us will ever be in that situation. But if we were, and you had implemented Peggy's plan, this article gives you hope that, yes, if you implemented a plan where you were prepared, you definitely could survive for a whole year just eating out of your working pantry and extended pantry. But then they've got some great articles on canning and canning basics. So if you're new to canning, you might really enjoy that section. And then they also talk about drying food, smoking food, and pickling food, because these are all different methods, obviously, of preserving. And that's it. That's what they cover: the pantry, canning, and then drying, smoking, and pickling foods. So what's nice about this is and they're short little articles that you can read, in one sitting. and can help educate you as to, you know, have I ever thought about smoking food? How can I maybe smoke food in a small amount, you know, in my kitchen, you know, with maybe just a roasting pan and some cover on top, you know, different things like that. So they give you a lot of good ideas. And again, they're just like magazine articles, so you can read them pretty quickly. It's not where you're having to implement a plan or do anything more involved like Food Storage 101, but it's just to supplement. And because I really enjoy the magazine, I was happy when I saw this book, and I was happy to pick this up at a used bookstore because it helps supplement my knowledge. And that's really what it's all about. Once you find a basic book about food storage, whether it's this book or another book that you might have come across in your travels and that you might like, that's my dog. I don't know if you hear the collar. That's my dog Ovi coming in. Whatever book you find, this one I just found I mean, this is like one of the best I've ever seen. But once you have a book like this and you start implementing your plan, then that is when you start looking for books like this. And it can be this book, it could be their magazine, it can be other books. There's a host of books out there on being self-reliant, and the whole gamut of things. You know, I tend to really focus on the pantry and making sure I have sufficient food and water to feed my family. But there are so many other areas of being self-reliant, you know, including, you know, medical supplies, which are obviously very important when there might be shortages or disruptions in supply chains and so on and so forth, which is a little bit of what we saw, you know, during this quarantine time. So, you know, learning how to put together, you know, a little home first aid kit if you don't already have one and things like that. So that's what over time you're going to add these additional books about how to be self-reliant that simply help expand your knowledge base, and then something that you can implement slowly, little by little, over time on top of your initial Food Storage 101 plan. Now, if you'd like more information about how to get started building a prepper pantry, how to stock it with real food, how to do it on a budget, then be sure to click on this video over here, which is a playlist of my 3-part series, as well as some other videos for how to make homemade items for your prepper pantry and how to use them. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Love and God bless.